fans of eight-man football in Kansas know you pretty darn well for a while now, as along with Jeremy McGuire, you're the guy that commentates the eight-man state championships every year and also the eight-man all-star games for the last 22 years now.
Well, yeah, we've done the title games in 4 years at Russell, the first 4 years at Russell, and then the last 18 years or 22 years total have been down at Newton.
Right. So, how did you get into broadcasting? What got you into it?
Well, I think the Smoky Hill Public TV guys, and first of all, you got to say that I was involved with during the decade of the '90s with the Kansas Shrine Bowl. I was a camp director for the when it's Hare and Hayes, and we worked about 6-7 years to even get the camp director and convince the 15 board of directors of the Shrine Bowl that Hayes would be a good place. And I kept telling people that the Masonic or the Shrine dues that they paid is the same for somebody who lived in Liberal, Kansas, or Lakin, or Sharon Springs, Goodland, Colby, as it is for somebody in Overland Park or somebody back east. And I said, why don't you get it out here? Why don't you move the camp out here? So they came out, the 15 board of directors came out when Liberal High School was very good under, I think that's still Gary Cornelson's era. And Hayes High was really good in that 93, 94. And they is packed house. I mean, at Fort Hays State seats about 7,000 people. And there was a packed house or within 500 people being totally sold out. And it's just incredible environment, incredible deal. And the 15 board of directors met with Fort Hays State athletic director, which is Tom Spicer at the time. Now it's Kurt Hammocky, but at the time it was Tom Spicer. And they confirmed that after all that was over with, that, okay, the next Shrine Bowl game, basically moved the camp here. It was already here. The camp is here, but we had to work 6-7 years to get that. And a guy named Ralph Howerton and I, and a guy named from Russell named Roger Miles, and he was a treasurer of the Shrine Bowl. He was from one of the 15 board of directors, but he was one of the 3 board of directors out of the Isis Temple out of Salina that made up those 15. Us 3 mainly got the game to come to Hayes in 1997. So that broke the mold. And all this time, Smoky Hill Public TV was doing some of the interviews. And they came over when I was a camp director. They came over and I had all kinds of funny drills and funny things for the kids to do when there wasn't practicing football. We had wheelbarrow races. We had balloon things. We had all sorts of games. And then we had always the Wednesday before the Shrine Bowl game, we had a 16-ounce ribeye. We called it the big one. So I had all the different cooks from the Russell Shrine Club would mainly come over with the barbecue grill, some of the guys, and we'd cook these 16-ounce ribeyes. And some of these kids would eat 2 or 3 if they could. And but we had, I remember Gary Cornelson era, and he was here. In fact, we knew that July 20th and 21st was their wedding anniversary, so we had cakes made from them, and everything was a good time. And I'd always invite kids in that was patients of the Shriners Hospital. Some of them from Mazine, some of them from Oakley, some of them different places. And Smoky Hill was here all that time. And I think they was intrigued. Maybe, I just don't know. I never asked Michael Quaid or Les Kinnikinat, because Michael Quaid was, he was from Houston, and now he's doing the Gurus over there at the station in Bunker Hill. And Les Kinnikinat's the engineer, and he mainly he's the one who hired Jeremy McGuire and I from the get-go. So he's the one that hired me and then Jeremy. And Jeremy at the time had lots of experience because he worked for Eagle Radio or doing for 20 some years, did TMP, basketball and football and everything. So he was a good play-by-play guy all the time anyway. And they picked me, I guess, to be the color guy. And I was supposed to stay inside the lines occasionally. I got out of them and had a little fun. One funny thing that you'll love would be, this is at Russell in the first 4 years doing these games. And I'd have a great big stock trailer over there. And we call it the thoroughbred trailer. So we'd do like John Madden would do.
Right.
He always had his best players in offense, best player in defense, who made the most tackles, all this stuff. So we always had an offensive, defensive player each half in those 8-man games over there. And we'd have a guy bring a stock trader in. And so we'd have great big posters on the on the stock traders about whoever made those honors, whoever they were. And that was pretty intriguing. And I had it all set up to do that down in Newton also, but they didn't want to do it. I even had volunteers because I knew a guy, a big farmer. I had everything lined out to do the same thing we did in Russell down there, and they didn't want to do that. But anyway, that's how that worked. So that's how I don't know for sure, but I know this here several times. I've told them over the years when John Madden was still alive, I'd tell Les Kinnickinack, who's the engineer, I'd tell Les, I said, that Al Michaels ain't doing anything, and Chris Collinsworth and John Madden, they're not doing anything in the summer. Why don't you guys get them to do these games? And they said, no, you guys are 18. I said, get serious. I said, we're the ones priced right. You couldn't afford to get them characters. I even brought up names like Bob Davis and get Wyatt Thompson, get Mitch Holtis, all these other names I kept throwing out to them all the time. Because, see, Mitch Holtis was a Smith Center kid when I used to live up there and had a sporting shack and my insurance agency. And so I've known Mitch Holtis forever when he was in high school all the time. And he's just incredible for the Chiefs and did a great job for, of course, the K-State Wildcats prior to that. But as you all know, but I think that's probably what happened, Julia. That's how it probably got started. And they just kept with it, I guess.
So
but I know the 8-man guys, I know a lot of those coaches, and I respect every one of them. And most all of them, I think what they like about us is that if they give us information, we can always generally Max Preps go find out their stats. Most of it, all but a few schools use it. There was only about one or two, maybe Southeast Kansas, won't mention the schools, that was tough maybe for us to get the individual stats because they didn't use Max Preps. And they didn't want to. They didn't want to give them to me. I said, well, how can I give your kids credit? What do you want me to do when a certain kid makes a tackle? You want me to just say, well, I'd like to tell you that he had 25 tackles this year, or 2 fumble recoveries and a couple interceptions, but the coach didn't send me anything. You want me to say that on the air? No, don't want to do that. Well, then get me the information, buddy. We'll give the kids credit where credit's due. And we want to know what they did in the community. How much community service did they do? Are they leaders of a church group? And which one's the most surprise to you the whole day of camp? Which one keeps you loose in practices on the field, off the field? Which is the biggest surprise to you? What's your main 3 keys to win the game on offense? What's your most 3 defensive keys? What's your sets that you use? These are sidebar things that I put on my game board. I don't think anybody else ever done that, but it's just my idea to create them. So you can talk about, you and I, Julian's already mentioned guys like Dub Oberly, and you got Russ Steinbreck and Steve Turner. They know the drill. And you can take Shelby down there at Canton Galba. You can take Matt Hoyer. You can take all them guys, and they're all fantastic. Kevin Ayers, I love him. All those guys. They know the drill. They know we've done that at the 8-man All-Star games up in Beloit. That's always tough. That's always a week or so right after state track meet. And so what's tough in there is to try to get the stats on 80 kids and 12 coaches in a week's time. And there's so many people have no clue whatsoever what it takes to do a game board the way we do them, the way we research the stuff behind the back door. My wife gives me fits. Larry, what are you doing? Well, I got missing 2 or 3 things here from this coach. Ain't got back to me yet on this or that. And I said, I got to do that. So I said, I want to have all the answers that might take place in a game in a split second. So I can add, well, this kid had this many tackles during the year, and how many fumble recoveries, and how many on offense, on defense, as well as on offense. And who do you want to have the pigskin in on the last play to win the game? And just those types of things, Julian.
So when it comes to, getting the stats is a pretty obvious thing for a broadcaster to do, so you can refer to them. Did you start asking for what I'll call, say, storyline material, who's your most improved player, who surprised you the most, these sorts of things. Did you start doing that at the beginning, or did you learn that from someone, or think of it later? When did you start doing that?
Oh, I did that from the get-go. I did that because I got thinking about the years when I taught and coached. Whether I was a high school basketball coach at Circle High School, assistant first 3 years, then head coach the last 2 years. But one thing about football, since you're forte, we're talking about football mostly. I went down there my last 2 years at Towanda Grade School and high school at Circle High School Thunderbirds, is that they want somebody. The head coach at the time was Harold Howard. He came from Valley Falls. He was down there at Circle, and he wanted somebody to go down and start grade school football in Benton, Kansas, Oil Hill Grade School, and Towanda Grade School. I could not get my hand up quick enough to go start a brand new Towanda Grade School Redskin football team with 48 kids, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And let me tell you this, I'm extremely proud of it. We never lost a game in 2 years. Tied once, never lost anything. And the reason why, I used the things I learned from my days at Cimarron High School under the legendary coach, Larry Friend. There's nobody better. There's nobody faster than him. You can talk to thousands of coaches in Kansas. There's nobody, not a soul faster than him. He would spot you, Julian, and me if we're on the same team. He'd spot us 80 yards, and he'd run all 100 and back in the last 5-10 yards, back in and beat everybody. And want to know what's holding you back, Julian? What's holding you back, Jantz? Well, I'm slow. But he ran the 100-yard dash back in the 54, 56 era in 9.4 seconds.
Sounds
and
fast.
A 20.4 220. In like 1/10 of a second in the 1956 Olympic trials out in California, representing American Olympics. And if anybody got hurt, top 3 sprinters, he was the first sub that's going to call up. That's how fast he was. Can you imagine having a coach that way? How many coaches, truthfully, great players, all that probably, but how many can go out there and really do it right along with the kids you're coaching? There are not very many.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or at least I don't see very many of them doing it. Someone said, "Oh no, I need an oxygen bottle." I'll guarantee you, Jantz would need one today. They need probably a gurney and an ambulance pick me up, take me to the morgue. So I try to go out there and play today.
So you were talking about starting up that program and how it was going to lead into, coming up with storylines and giving players credit for good things and whatnot that the general public might not know about, but coaches could tell you, to make the broadcast better.
Yeah, well, that's exactly. I knew back then what my kids did. I knew the work ethic they had in grade school. We only had one injury, Julian, and that kid on the figure 8 roll deal. You know what that is. Coaches know what a figure 8 roll deal is, on a buffalo grass field, and he just landed wrong and broke a finger. And that's the only injury he had. But I'll tell you what, we were in shape. I mean, there might be 2.5 hours in junior high practice back when they allowed all that kind of stuff. And we just, and I had a drill. You'll love this drill, being a junior high coach, and I recommend you try it even at Ned City Junior High where you're at now as coaching. But we had a drill. We used I used a lawnmower, 21-inch lawnmower, went down the turf. I said, these kids never played football before. So what we did is had 5 yards straight out. Picked up lawnmower, got straight out. That's called X. Y was 7 yards and diagonal to the sideline. 9 yards was to the post pattern, and then went to the post. So we had X, Y, Z. I only had 3 plays in junior high. Got to keep it simple, stupid, or keep it simple, coach. That was our philosophy. And so what I do is I have cones first. So we had it lined out, and you could tell he's right down to. You had the mowing. The mower was as low to the grass as you could. So everybody knew where the hell the pattern was at, and it's only 20 inches wide. So you go down and plant your inside foot, pivot, go to the outside. As soon as that pivot was flipped by your receiver, the ball was in the air to where it's supposed to be by my quarterback. We worked on all the timing on this drill. Part of the deal, keep it simple, stupid. So I said, they don't know what to do. I got to teach them. I got to teach them everything. You're going to crawl before you walk before you run. The type 10 mentality. And that's what we did. And so then I'd add after we did that, different drills, then I'd get behind the defense as the head coach. I'd get behind the defense and I'd either use my fingers like an X or use a Y or a Z like zebra or Zorro. And my quarterback and the receiver knew what was going to play. And then we had a live body in there trying to play defense on these guys, just strictly drills. So they knew it's either going to go 5 yards or 7 yards or 9. The kids knew, the offensive player and the quarterback. Nobody else did. And that's how we did that. And I can tell you this, in those 2 years, never had a pass intercepted. Never, ever. Had a few dropped, but not very many. And I said a kid that came down and used his mom was a secretary at school, and named Nora Jean McWilliams, and his name's Rocky. And Rocky was a student. He had knee surgery, so he came down from the high school because he couldn't play high school football, and he came down and helped me. And so he became my receivers coach. Gave him something to do because he couldn't play high school football. He was hurt. And we used his mom and dad's 21-inch lawnmower to do all this. He'd see me later on. You got to understand, in 2017, he was the potentate of the Median Temple. So he became a Mason and a Shriner, mainly because of his dad. And he gave a lot of credit to me, he said. And so anyway, he'd always see me this drill, and he'd say, Coach, we should have patented that drill. Look what we could have done with that. And I said, Rocky, we can't patent that drill. But I told that to lots of people. I said, if you're going to be around young people, 6th, 7th, 8th graders, whatever, or just learning, that might be a smart little simple drill. Keep it simple, stupid, and do it that way. Practice with cones. Anyway, then put live bodies in there, and you'll see the timing and the rhythm take place between your quarterback and receivers. It's incredible. It really is. And it was my idea to do that. But we learned those things. I learned simple things like that from Larry Friend. I mean, that's back when you could block. You could roll block into him. The whole scheme, everything's different today. Now you kiss them. You turn them one direction, you just kiss them. It ain't blocking. It's hardly even be football, in my opinion, the way they have the rules today. But that's the way things change.
The rules certainly have changed over the years. Something that I think the average fan probably doesn't appreciate very much is the art of being a broadcaster or a radio guy or whatnot. I think a lot of people just look at it and say, oh, you just talk about what's happening. What are some things you have to learn if you're going into broadcasting, either for television or radio? Obviously, they're very different because one of them has a visual and the other one doesn't. But what are some things you learned, or what are some things that young broadcasters could learn to level up and get better?
Well, I think that when they do the study on the kids, the more you can do, if you go watch them play, maybe before maybe they're in school, maybe at college, learn how to be a broadcaster. And get this, I did do that for ECTV. It's called Eagle Cable TV here in Hayes, and they hired me to go do one ball game was Waukene and Ellis, another was Beloit over at Russell, and they said we got a rookie, we got a kid that never had done play-by-play at Fort Hays State. So what are you keep the airways going? I said, well, that ain't no problem with Jantz. Everybody wants me to shut up, let alone keep talking. So I said, I can keep the airways going. And, but because didn't want no dead moments doing this on TV, and I'm in radio. We was doing radio then over at Ellis at the time. And so what I did, I went to the ECTV office, because I had my game boards, offense and defense, who's the starters, and all the stats on both sides of the ball already figured out. So I said, if this kid's a rookie, never done it before, you can't real with headphones on. I can't say, hey, buddy, it was number 62 that did this deal. No, that would be catty. That's not right. And people wouldn't like that at all. So I wanted to have him know the same thing in front of him that I had in front of me. And all I had to do then was just a point point to the defensive guy that made the tackle on the defensive side. So he could pick up from it and say, oh, that tackle was made by, Julian or Larry or whoever it was, and how many they did get the stats. So I'd point to them. So that's one thing you do. That's a legal cheat sheet or crib sheet. That's one thing. But
That's
the more
smart.
that you can have,
the audience has no idea that you're doing it. They can't hear that you're pointing at something. I mean, that's really good.
oh, that's exactly what I came up with. I said, you got to do something like that because you didn't want to embarrass your partner that's his first game he'd ever done, and so that's how I came up with it. Whether it's good, bad, or ugly, that's what I did, or how I addressed the issue, and we got along just fine that way. And so McGuire and I've done all that kind of stuff all the time. So when he's writing down the stats, in other words, if you made 6 yards a game, 1st and 10, you made 6, we're bringing up 2nd and 5 or whatever it is. Why then, when he's doing that, I said, and that tackle was made by number 32. And he had 86 tackles this year, 3 fumble recoveries, 2 interceptions, and he's a 5'10", 160-pound senior or whatever. And bingo, they were about ready for the next play again, see? But if that's where I bring in the actual stats. So that's how we coordinate things between us. He
Jeremy,
does the call. He calls what the.
Does he ever give you a little hand signal to say, "Hey, I need you to fill for me for the next 15 seconds or whatever"? Will you just then reel off, okay, this kid's had 27 carries for, does he?
He probably gives me the stop sign. Hey, quit talking. We're ready for the next play. Because I keep talking, fill up the airways until I see we got 2nd and 3. Oh, they're up there ready to snap the ball, and then so we go there. But no, we've done it so many years, I guess, that it's secondary or it's just subconscious what we do, you might say. Now, in the early days, when you have the headphones on, here's a trick for you too, Julie, for these young rookies that might be doing it. Your headphones, you might hear, see, Smoky Hill's different than some of them. And I love some of the people that try to do that stuff with only one camera and one person doing it. Now, the reason why the 8-man people love Smoky Hills because we generally got 3 or 4 cameras on the action. I mean, there's cameras on both sides of the press box. There's generally some down on the field. Maybe one's on the sideline. So they'll have up to 4 cameras generally, and they're mostly all volunteer. There might be 24 or 30 people behind the scenes doing a game for Smoky Hill that 99% of people have no clue on. That's how good they are. And their DVDs is awesome how they put them together. I mean, the label on it. Oh, you got one half the games in the first half, second half's on second, 2 DVDs per each game. And you put it in there, and if they sell $25, $30, whatever they charge, it's worth it for a keepsake so that the kids down the road, 30, 40 years later, they can tell their own kids and grandkids, you might say. But so we just hope we give them credit for that. But they are really, the 8-man association, they love Smoky Hill. They love the way we do it. And I love the way they produce it. The engineers, the people behind the scenes, Les Kinnick, he might have 4 or 5, he's in that truck, and they have 4 or 5 videos that they're looking at. And he's the one picks the ones that's in the actual DVD when they print them off.
Right, yeah. Backtracking briefly, I want to make a quick point. You mentioned, you don't want to embarrass your partner on the air, and you said because, basically because you like this guy, you want him to do well. But the thing is, even if you didn't like your broadcast partner, it would be a bad idea to embarrass him because then the presentation is going to be bad, the show is going to be bad. You're not going to give a good broadcast. It's kind of like pro wrestling, where even if 2 wrestlers hate each other, they need to do what they're supposed to do so that there's a good match and the audience likes it. Were there any broadcasters?
You're absolutely you're spot on. You're spot on that. Yep, you are.
Are there any broadcasters that you looked up to, or maybe you really admired that you thought, man, I wish I could be like that, or maybe borrowed a little bit from him or something?
Well, you got to understand, one of my favorite ones, of course, was Bob Davis here at Fort Hays State for 16 years, football and basketball, and you got to understand his wife Linda and my wife Susan, they play in the handheld bell choir at the Methodist Church, and we go watch them do their thing, ring their bells, and this is maybe not the best thing to say, but it's actually the truth. we'd go down and we'd watch the first church service. They do their 2 or 3 songs, and how they could each one have a certain bell, certain tones, and make music out of it. It's beyond me. But we'd sit. There's a guy named Bob Bloom, and his wife Mary Lou was in it, and Bob Davis' wife Lynn was in it, and my wife Susan. We'd go watch the first church service, watch them do their gig. Okay, so then the second, we didn't want to listen to Mike Cooper, who was a radio guy, and he's a great guy, still in Hayes. We didn't want to go listen to his Sunday school class. So we'd all skip out, us 3 guys. We'd skip out when Hadley Hospital was still in town, before they have now Hayes Med, down on 7th Street. We'd go down there, we're going around there, and we'd cheer up little old ladies that's in the hospital bed. And we might see 10 or 11, 12 different rooms in an hour's time. And we wait till the second church service at the United Methodist Church here in Hayes. We get started. And about 11:15, 11:20, old Bob Davis looked at me and said, is it about time to go pick up, basically what I should have said, our wives. But for many years, guess what we called them, Julian? And I don't care if this is on the air, because that's exactly what Bob Davis called them. He said, is it time to go pick up the dingbats?
Right.
And because he thought you got to be dinging, we always thought you got to be dinging if you're going to ding the bells, being a handheld bell choir. So that was his name. So he'd look at me and he'd say, Jantz, yo, Jantz, is it time to go pick up the dingbat? And I said, yeah, it's about 11:15, 11:20. Time we get out of here and go to it. We got time to see one more room. Well, if some lady was asleep, we'd just go to the next room. But here's the trick. Here's what we'd do. Bob Bloom would probably buy, trinkets like bubblegum rings, you'd say, in a bubblegum machine. He probably has spent $2,000 or $3,000 or more on McDonald's, little farm animals, or rings. Well, we'd have a whole pocket full of rings with us. Either Bob Bloom or Larry Jantz would stick a ring on these girls' finger, these ladies. And some of them had tubes all over them. They were hurting in the hospital. It was in there for reasons. And we'd say, hey, sweetheart, today's your lucky day. You just got engaged to the growling voice of the Fort Hays State Tigers, Mr. Bob Davis. Some of them got so excited, made so much noise, Julian, that the nurses would come running. What the hell's up? What's happening with this gal in here? We said, time out. We're just chilling, having a special moment. And we go from that room to another room, another room, another room. If somebody's asleep, we just keep on going. And that's what we did. But Bob Davis is a trip. And then 32 years at KU. And 16 of them 32 years is the voice of the Kansas City Royals. And I loved his comment when you made a 3 from down the corner, he'd say, swish! I mean, and nobody does stuff that he did. But I don't know where, and Bob Davis is still in Lawrence. Him and his wife, Linda, know quite well. And they've downsized their home. They live in an assisted living thing now. But he's just incredible. And he got his start out here in Hayes, a rookie, you might say. And he just worked all the way up. But I admired him for the way he personally did it on radio. And he also did radio, but he's also done some TV, I think, for the Royals for a time or two in there. But that's 48 years. And I made certain things for him, plaques. And I got to tell you one thing since we're talking about it. When he first started in what's called Sheridan Coliseum, and his first game was December 6, 1969. And back then they had a 10-cent Pepsi program. 10-cent Pepsi program. The Fort Hays was playing St. Benedictines. And on the back of the program, the slick 10-cent Pepsi program, was a picture of Bob Davis behind a little table, like a score table. And it said, we want to welcome the recent history major from Worcester University, the campus of Fort Hays State University, where he's going to be the growling voice of the Fort Hays State Tigers, perched high above the maples in Sheridan Coliseum. Now, years later, when they converted Sheridan Coliseum to Beach Smith Auditorium, guess what? I have incredible amounts of tongue and groove gym floor wood. They cut it out 4 by 6 foot chunks. I have many, many, many items framed in tongue and groove wood that came from Sheridan Coliseum, not Cunningham Hall, the main gymnasium before Gross Coliseum was built. And so I framed some of the things, pictures. I call it collage. Several collages I've given Bob Davis over the years with him in it. And I read that one I just read to you, that I showed it to him. I got down an hour and a half before a KU game one time, and he saw the back of me, and he said, "Yo, Jantz, you still broadcasting games?" And I just heard his voice. I didn't even look around to him. I was headed for the water fountain. And I said, "Yo, Davis, you still calling games for the Hawks?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Hey, I'll be through with you in about 5 minutes. I got to go to the gig with old Bill Self." So he went and did his little voice gig with him. Comes back to me, and I said, "Hey, I got something for you, Bob. Let me see it." And he said, "Where'd you get this stuff?" And I said, "Well, they had the Forsyth Library, but they didn't know who this old coot was." I said, "I know who that guy is. Let me borrow this stuff. I'm gonna go take photocopies of it," which I did. But I said, "Davis, I'm only gonna read one of them to you." I read the one about him perched high above the maples in Sheridan Coliseum, growling voice. I read that to him. Honest to God, he looked at me and he stuttered. He said, "I'm a play guy. I'm not supposed to stutter." But he did. It touched him. It touched him very much. He said, "I've never had any of this stuff. I don't have it." He said, "I met my wife out there at Linda." And he said, she was from Russell, Kansas originally. Michaelis' his last name. And anyway, he said, "That's so special." So we were tight friendship when he was here at Fort Hays State, and ever since down at KU. And I've made so many things. He's got one of my original KU Rock Chalk posters that's professionally done, and him and his wife have toasted the thing every day. It was a Hamilton Beach toaster that I had a guy fix up for me, a professional painter in town. So they're very sharp. You'd have, I don't know how many dollars somebody would probably sell them for or buy them, but nobody like it. So most of my things I have in my man cave is hand built, handmade. I don't go buy that stuff, but it's unique. You can't go buy some of that stuff. But it goes back to the voice. Bob Davis is my most favorite. I like Mitch Holders too. He tells it like it is. He knows a lot of stats. Wyatt Thompson, him and I used to run and jog, but he took over Bob Davis' place in the middle 80s, 84 or 85. Then Wyatt Thompson lived a block south of me. He'd be at my house at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we'd go run and jog, but he smoked cigarettes back then. So I'd tell him, "You're going to run 2 or 3 steps in front of me or 2 or 3 steps behind me, because I'm getting that secondhand smoke out of you, Wyatt." And so he'd do that. And we get back about 6:20, 6:25, and have a hot cup of coffee then. And then he'd go about a block south of me, take a shower, and I'd hear him do the sports at KYS at 7 o'clock in the morning. And so he was good friends too. And I've always respected Wyatt. And but then he was even a speaker at an eight-man football game banquet about, let's say, 3-4 years ago. And him and I sat by each other. And I said, "You remember those days we used to jog in the morning?" "Yeah, I do." And I said, "Do you finally quit smoking?" I said, "I'm still hurting today. It's breathing that secondhand smoke of you." And he just laughed at me. He said, "Yeah, I quit some time ago, Jim." I said, "Well, congratulations, Wyatt." So those 3 guys, I like them real well. I like the knowledge, if you're talking about pro stuff of basketball. I love Jay Billis. There are some people I just despise. I couldn't stand Bill Walton in a heartbeat. I'd throw him off the California Ocean as far as I'm concerned. I don't like him at all. And I don't like some of the people that have on ESPN on this ESPN Plus, because some of them, they don't know who they're at. They're talking about themselves all the time instead of the players of the teams that they're involved with. That's just my take, Julian. Does that help you at all?
Oh, sure. I mean, nobody can say you're wrong for not liking something you don't like. If you find something annoying, that's all there is to it. Covering the 8-man state games for so long, 8-man's it's a game where you have some teams that manage to get back over and over again. And, it's true in other classifications to a degree, but I wanted to ask you about a few of these guys, what you think of them and their teams, and maybe some memories from the games you called when they made it to state. And you've already mentioned most of them at the point in passing, but I'll start out with the one that's been there the most time since you've gotten there, and that's Matt Hoyer of Hanover, 9 times, taking home 6 championships. Obviously, it's one of the great dynasties in 8-man football history. One of 2 coaches, I won 6 state titles at the 8-man level. What can you say about Matt Hoyer, about his teams, about some of those games?
I love Matt Hoyer. He's an offensive genius. 1 year in particular, but he had 1 year they had about maybe 9 Brunas on the team. You know, and how many of them was brothers or first cousins or whatever. And you got Bruner to Bruner. Bruner was on the tackle. Bruner on here. Bruner on the line. Bruner here. Bruner's everywhere. But he was incredible. 1 year, I remember correctly, doing the stats before the game, he had big linemen and he run the ball most of the time. And then next year, after that, it's winning back-to-back state championships. I can't tell you all the years. There's quite a few of them, like you already mentioned.
2014 to 2015. 2014 was the year he had a pretty big, strong team, and they ran it a bunch. The year after that was when they were young. You know,
which year was that when they did the passing game? They had about 5 guys from 500 yards receiving to 1,500 yards. 5 guys.
Yeah, that was 2015.
And I kept talking to Matt before the game or stats leading up to the game and calling him when he wasn't in his class or something, doing some preliminary work prior to the getting things ready for the game boards. And I'd asked Matt, I don't see much stats on running. Larry, we don't have any. I got to pass the ball. I don't have the material that we can really sustain a good running game. But I think that's when Carter Bruna?
He was a freshman.
Yeah, but is that the time he had 56 touchdowns that year?
That was Will Bruna.
Passing?
Yeah, Will Bruna had 56 or something, yeah.
Mercy. I mean, but it's just awesome with how he was smart enough to adjust what kind of, not every coach is that way, but someone's going to run the same thing year after year after year.
Yeah, I probably would.
It'd be like but he would adjust to whatever he had. And that's the talent or the wisdom of a really sharp, smart coach. And he had offensive minded big time. Not that his defense, he slacks on defense either. I'm not saying that at all. But I respect him 150%. And he was just a great guy. It's just one of many.
Oh yeah,
sure.
The first time he made it was in 2007. They played against Maxville, and that was a very close game. Do you have any particular memories of this one?
Well, at Maxville, I remember going down to watch the pregame because it was fairly close to me. So I remember going down and watching them. It seemed like they had a V formation, kind of like the reverse of what Smith Center would do with their wishbone, and they just try to run power play that way, if I'm not mistaken. You might know, I can't remember the coach's name now, but everybody's really good.
Grizel was the coach.
That's it, Coach Grizel. You're right. But I just remember mainly with Hanover just dominated about everything, even though, Maxwell was in there. That's what I recall. And then I still remember when Maxwell did, I think they played Clifton Clyde. Is that the same year they played Clifton Clyde Eagles?
No, they beat Pawnee Heights in the sub-state round that year. The year after that, they played Clifton Clyde in the sub-state game and lost to them after beating.
Yeah, Winner. Clifton Clyde had that. Russ Steinbrock had Bill Cypher's kids had the big. Oh, they were huge. They had some linemen, and they could have like bulldozers in the backfield. I mean, when they just manhandle, they just run right over people.
As someone who played defense against them, I can say you just got run over. As someone who played defense against them in those times, I can say, pretty much everybody just got run over. Wasn't much.
Yeah, they just steamroll you. It's like I call them bulldozers, probably, or like a bull in a china closet to get out of the way because you're going to feel the pain when they hit you. Some of those comments I probably made during the air, I don't know.
Oh, sure.
I'm guilty of that probably.
Well, it was true, so can't really blame you for it. The last time we saw Hoyer at state was in 2020 when he beat St. Francis, his 6th title. And actually, I'm trying to think. I think Hanover had been champions before with Tom Young, so it wasn't the school's 6th title, but it was the 6th title with Coach Hoyer. Next person I wanted to bring
that was that the first year that St. Francis got in there, because they went back-to-back years, didn't they?
They were there in 16, 19, and 20, and they lost every.
Yeah. Yep. And they had one year in there as they started the head coach used to be assistant coach in my hometown, Cimarron. He went up there, had never coached 8-man before, but he was the first coach there. And I know Ward Cassidy and some of the people in administration there at St. Francis forever, because I even went out and put a fez on and honored some of the players. There was a Blanchard kid back when Tim Lambert was the head coach out there, and the Smith Center kid. He was out there for 17 years, and as the first player from St. Francis that ever made the Shrine Bowl game. And I was there giving a program that day honoring that Blanchard kid. He was either guard or center on the team, but they'd never had a player on it before. And that's when Ward Cassidy and all those and Scott Carmichael, I think his name is. He'd been there forever as a coach, assistant coach. You probably know him.
No, I don't actually. The name is new. But going back to the
but
coaches, yeah.
But anyway, they Hoyer was just sharper than heck. That's not taking anything away from the other opponents, but he'd always find a weakness and he'd capitalize on it.
So another guy who's been there a bunch of times, Steve Tiernan. I think he's been to 8 games, won 4, lost 4 at this point. Some of them in Division 1, and he's done it at 3 different schools.
Yes, he has.
Yeah, tell me about this fella.
Yeah. Well, I love it. Of course, he grew up in Tipton. His nickname is Pete. A lot of people don't know that, but he's like he's alive. One time he went to one of the celebrations and had a motorcycle wreck trying to get back to Osborne. But he got his start under Gary Cornelson and 11-man football down in Liberal. Then he went out to B&B up there, and he was successful at B&B. And he knew won state championships there, and he knew they was going to close that school down. So that's when he went to Osborne. So he went to Osborne, won state there more than once. And then, of course, he went down to because the guy used to be at Baileyville because the principal at Solomon, and he hired Steve to go down and be the coach. That's the first time the Solomon Grizzlies, I think they're called. That's the first time they ever made the state, and that's when I call them Claflin Central Plains Oilers destroyed them really bad. Chris Steiner's team just destroyed them, and but they'd never been there before. So and they wouldn't have probably got there if it wasn't Steve wasn't the coach. No, I love him to death. He's a great guy. We text back and forth. Now you'll love this about him. So
well, after Solomon, he went back to Osborne.
Yes, he did.
And immediately was in the state game.
But here's the deal. So Smoky Hill Public TV, let's say 2 years ago, the administration said we want to redo some of the 6-man, 8-man, 11-man games that they broadcasted during that summer. During the month of June, we're going to do 2 games a Saturday, 4 Saturdays, 2 games. They're going to do 8 games. And I got a call from Les Kennington that says, Jantz, what games do you have? I said, well, we'd done the Wild West Bowl 6-man down there in Dodge City. And we'd done all these 8-man games. I said, for God's sakes, Les, I said, that's probably 60 to 70 games we've done. Jeremy McGuire and I've done for you guys. Counting 6-man, 8-man, 11-man. And you want me to make that call? Hang on. I'm going to call some coaches. So I'd call Chris Steiner down there, and I called old Tiernan. I called these guys and said, which game you want to do? You've been at it multiple times. Which one? And old Steve said, don't put the one between Quinter back in 2009. Don't put that in Baileyville. We lost that game. We didn't do very good. And I said, yeah, but that's the only time the Quinter's been in there. Maybe we ought to put that in there for 8-man. And we did. And so there's two games during that. These 2 games of Saturday, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, during the month of June 2 years ago. That would be in 2021, I think. And so anyway, what made it funny was that I would text Steve Tiernan. I said, hey, your game's coming on in 10 minutes. You got the popcorn ready? Yeah, I do. This is funny stuff. So I would during the game, I'm in my man cave watching the game replay on Smoky Hill Public TV, and he's wherever he's at watching it also. And if it's a good play, I'd have fun with it because when the game was really live, when we did it, whatever years it were, he's on the sideline doing the offensive deal, calling the plays, being the head chief there, and I'm up in the broadcast booth. So now this is a different setting. This is fun. So I'm a play-by-play guy or a color guy, and I'm in my man cave, and there'd be a good play going on. I text him. I said, that couldn't have been the coaching staff that had that play. That had to be the cheerleader's mother. Somebody called that. He said, no, that was the Booster Club guy. And we go back and forth. I bet you 35, 40 times we text each other with funny comments back and forth. What happened?
Yeah, for sure.
And if it's a good play or bad play, and I said, that had to be your assistant coach called that play, you know. And that was funny. That was a different thing. That was a different experience for me as a TV guy, you know, because it only, you know, that we did that. And so I'd call those Steiner down at Central Plains, and he wanted to have the one, I think, when Beaverly was in there to play. Was that 214? Yeah. 214, I think it was. He wanted that game versus some others. And so that game, pardon?
That game was against Hanover.
Yeah, but he wanted that one in there. And but it was just these types of things that when the coaches asked me that, or the Smoky Hill, I said, give me a few days. I've got to contact the coaches, find out which game they might want to have back on there. And
you mentioned that Quinter Baileyville State game, and that one is probably my favorite 8-man game that I've seen because first of all, it's just a great game. You know, you've got two really good teams going at it. It's got a very satisfying storyline where, you know, you have the underdog Quinter Bulldogs going up against the defending champions in Baileyville, you know, 25-game win streak, all that sort of thing. And Baileyville, I think, honestly, it's arguable. I've seen film on all 6 of those state teams that went from 2008 to 2013. I've seen at least one game of them. I think that 2009 squad, if not the best team they had, was up there. It was arguably the best team they had. That 2008 squad was really good, though, too. And so Quinter upsets them, and it's just madness, right? You tell me about this game.
It's 20. If I remember correctly, it's 28-26 final score.
It was.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yep.
You want to tell me a little bit about this game? Give the audience a sense of what kind of a contest this was, you know, because it must have been fun to call this game.
Oh, it was. And most all of them are. The only thing we really hate is, like, even this year, actually, I felt sorry for, and because I know the South Central coach in Division II this particular year, and he's done such a great job, and he's related to a lot of people. You got to understand, when I'm in high school, they all played 11-man in that cold water protection. We were in the Iroquois League. Greensburg's 11-man, Ashland protection, cold water, Meade, Fowler, Plains, and Cimarron. And Cimarron's only 11-man team playing yet today. Everybody else is 6-man or 8-man. And so a lot of names on the protection team this year or the South Central. They had the guy Girk and the Leapers. Well, those are protection names, man. And then you get the Huck and Hand and Louch. They were on the Coldwater team. These are all names back in my area, so it had to be the grandparents who I played with or whatever. And but I felt sorry for Brett West. You know, they did a great job upsetting, or but maybe upset. I call it an upset when they beat Victoria on their place and destroyed them like about 42-20 to get to the state championship. And then they get drilled in a halftime in that rain, slush, snow, crazy weather. On November 25th, right after Saturday after Christmas at the title game. And Axtell, I guarantee you, next year everybody be looking because I got a feeling they could have a 4-peat.
They definitely have some good
players. My
opinion. Back. But I want to steer it back a little bit towards that Quinter and Baileyville game. You want to about some of your memories of this game or exciting moments, or just give people who haven't seen it yet a little taste. Maybe they want to go and watch it.
Well, and you probably have access to where they go watch it, probably on YouTube or maybe your 8-man. You got it on your 8-man webinar, do you?
It is on my
Or
YouTube channel. Yeah, people can watch it there.
Well, if I'm correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the head coach had some cancer issues?
Yeah, Coach Wolf had.
That's right. And I remember that deal too. So that was a lot of trauma. And how much did that fire up the Quinter Bulldogs? I think more so than what most people realize, that they wanted to win it for their coach, and they went beyond the extra mile to make sure the Quinter Bulldogs pulled out that victory over Baileyville B&B. That's just the Falcons. That's what I think.
I mean, not only.
I don't know. I'm not there. I don't know. But I was on the broadcast booth, and you could feel it. You could almost feel the vibration and the adrenaline that's coming from the Bulldogs team when they upset them. Because to me, it was an upset over Baileyville.
Oh, it's certainly an upset. I mean, if that game gets played 10 times, and I've talked to Brian Rush, who was the coach for that team, if you guys play that game 10 times, you guys maybe win one or two of them. You guys happen to be on the day where you won it. The Bulldogs had to play, I think, just about the best game they possibly could. And the Falcons they were good. They played very well, but they weren't at their top level. I think if B&B plays their top level, I don't think Quinter can beat them. Unless the officials get bribed or something, obviously, or something stupid like that. But,
it seems like they had there's a kid named Reed, remember, on the team. I think his dad run a grocery store or whatever. And that's some of I just remember going out there watching some of their games and that year during the year. And they had a solid team, was well coached, and assistant coaches did like ball records. Heck, he was the coaches and the cancer or either chemo or something else sick. He didn't make every game. I know that. I don't remember what percentage of him made.
I think he missed a game or two early in the season, and then he was back.
Yeah.
He didn't have play calling responsibilities. He was there on the sideline to motivate and to kids' heads in the game and whatnot. Still an important job, but I think Rush was the one calling plays at that
point. Was John Chris? He was athletic director then, probably.
I think Ruckman was the other
AD or something, and probably boys basketball coach for sure. But he might have helped too. I don't know. But they have an incredible work ethic at their school. Always have been. When they did the I was one of the first four guys when they had the Crossroad Classic basketball game, that Castle Rock Classic, they call it the Classic. Castle Rock Classic. And that was Bill Martin and his wife Linda. They hired me way back when to do them that tournament out there. And so, I always thought, which if you had to live in a different community, where would you want to go? Back in those days, I loved what Northern Valley did at Alameda. I loved their work ethic. I loved the way their kids did, and everything, the way their winning record back in the 80s and 90s, what they were doing with Chuck Fessenden and Doug Ruzick. Now, of course, at Norton coach in basketball yet. Chuck's retired now. He's one of the first ones started 8-man football. They honored him a few years ago up at Beloit now and very much deservingly so. I've even refereed volleyball games since then, the last 2 or 3 years up in Northern Valley. And old Chuck's volunteer. He's a lineman. He's a lineman judge on the volleyball team. So he's still in the game. He's still there.
Yeah, I see him at
track. He's just a great guy.
He's coaching their pole vaulters. It's actually how I managed to get in touch with him and borrow his film so that I could digitize it and online watch. But
yeah, and he's won state and everything.
Oh, yeah.
He's won girls basketball, boys basketball, football, track, and he's just so humble. He's like my high school coach, Larry Friend. He don't brag about nothing. He just did what he's supposed to do.
Yeah, that's an interesting
incredible
thing about
coach.
These guys, when you talk to, I mean, I'm sure they won't mind that I say this. When you talk to guys like Steve Tiernan, Kevin Ayers, and so forth, they usually downplay how much they know about the game. When in actual fact, Hoyer too, these guys are masterminds. They really know the game inside and out. But they'll always downplay it, and they'll just say, "Oh, I just have really good players," which is true. They have great players, but if you give me those players, I'm not getting the results that they're getting. I mean, I wouldn't be able to use them as well. But I want to ask you.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, when you see a Steve Tiernan team, and obviously you've seen him coach at different schools, what's common across those teams? What do what can you expect from a team that he's coaching?
Generally, Not very many penalties. They're going to be fundamentally sound. They're going to block well, and they're going to pay attention to details. And they have very few penalties most all the time. And he might, I don't know if he does, I've never been to his practices, but he might, I'll bet you, he probably runs the same play 10 times running until they get it right. I can remember in 11-man football one time, Augusta, and I'm at Circle. This goes back a long time ago. This proves the point about being disciplined and whatever. Every play the coach designs in a playbook, whether it be Larry Friend and Cimarron, Plainville, wherever, or your 8-man coaches, or all the ones we're talking about with Matt Hoyer, Steve Sheridan, Russ Steinbrook, Kevin Ayers. Every play is designed to be a touchdown if everybody does things properly. If you block right and everything else, but seldom does it happen. Well, at Augusta, this is the terminology maybe every coaches can even pick up on. One coach at Augusta only had 18 players. They're playing 11-man football. Had 18 players. I'm up in the stands scouting for Circle back in the day before you had huddles and all that stuff.
Right.
And they'd run they only had 6 plays. And you'd hear the Augusta, I've been in the Augusta crowd section, the fan base, up there sitting on the top row doing my scouting. They're bitching and hollering and giving a coach hell because they only got 6 plays on this side and 6 plays the other side. But guess what? They beat the team that whoever this played that night. And because the whole deal goes back to if you run each play perfectly, block the schemes and everything else, every play is designed to be a touchdown.
It's better to be.
And they only run 6 plays both sides of the field. That's all they did.
Right. It's better to be an expert at a few things than to be just okay at a lot of things. Yeah.
That you're spot on. That's words out of my mouth. That's good. That's exactly what it was. And that you take a look at this now. You take a look at it. I tell you what, it'd be heck for you. How would you going to scout Extell Eric Detweiler today?
Well,
they run so many multiple schemes, misdirection, this here, and it's almost like Andy Reid, the Kansas City Chiefs, or Pat Mahomes. You better not predict what they're going to do because they're going to do the opposite when the ball snaps.
I think the tough thing about Detweiler is that he is really good at spotting what you want to do. So, for example, one of his best running plays is speed option, which one way they'll run speed option is they'll loop the guard around the defensive end, which one thing, it tends to widen that defensive end out, and they'll crack on the linebacker with the split end, and they'll run speed option, they'll read the end and either pitch it or keep it. Well, if you're going to defend the speed option well, one way you could do that is you could switch up what your linebacker and defensive end are doing. You could have the defensive end take the pitch man. You could send your linebacker after the quarterback. That leaves the end with nobody to block. That's the Coach McLean thing to do, Fred McLean from Madison. But the problem is, if you do that, if you're committing your defensive end outside and you are sending your linebacker that way, Detweiler's going to spot that, and he's going to run quarterback lead, quarterback ISO against that because you're weak to the inside at that point. And he's just going to kill you with that. It's very difficult because all of his most important plays, such as speed option, have a play off of it that he can go to if you're trying to counter it. He can go the other direction on you, basically. He's a smart guy, and he has good players, and he's made the most of it, for certain.
And you take Broxterman this year, and you take Brandon Smiles. You take them 2 guys. They did exactly what you just described. They did exactly that thing, and when they against South Central.
It's a pain in the butt. I've tried to figure out a way.
I talked to Eric after the game a little bit, and then we had to hurry up and get on the road.
Right. And
when we came back, I can tell you this for anybody down the road. Between Newton and Lindsberg trying to get a butt back to Hayes, we were south of south of Saline about 20 miles, but there was always 20 to 25 vehicles in the ditch. So, but I asked Eric after the game out on the turf, I said, how was the turf? He said, the second half was all decent. It's kind of packed down then. The second half the second quarter, excuse me, because the game was over at halftime. He said the second quarter, I meant to say, was more packed down. The first quarter, a little sluggish, the footing a little bit, Tennessee to slip and slide a little bit. But it was just he just mentioned that there's a whole lot better packed down the second quarter, and they had better traction. And then of course you take, by goodness gracious, how Grady blocked that punt, and then catches the ball in the end zone, and did that. They were just awesome linemen on their 2-5 defense mostly, but they call it. Some people call it a 3-3. He calls it a 2-5-1, and they just amazing how they had their blocking scheme. Yeah, they had everything under control.
Yeah, they're daring you to pass with that alignment, but the thing is that they also have really good athletes who can cover passes, and they also have guys up front after your quarterback, so it's very difficult to beat them that way. And then in the run game, they've just got enough bodies that it's very difficult to get anything going.
Yeah, you can't key on one running back. You can't key on one running back because then it'll be Broxman gets loose or Smiley. One of them's going to get there, or even the other one who Rylan Boozing. I thought it was cute. Sawyer Dieters was the only lineman that wasn't named Boozing.
Yeah, there's a lot of Boozings in Axtell.
And here at Fort Hays State is Mitchell, who played several years ago. He's a student at Fort Hays State now. And, of course, Isaac Detwater, Eric's son, he's a student out here at Fort Hays State also right now.
I know they're currently very, very good players. Obviously, Isaac Detweiler is the most productive 8-man quarterback. So
yeah, he's good. There's some coaches out there, not to mention their names, but some coaches think that Brandon Swanson, the junior, now this year's quarterback, might even be better than what Isaac was. And I said, well, they're both doggone good. I guarantee you that. Oh, and Eric and then Dale Boozing, assistant coach, and then Chris Wiebe, I think, or Wiebe, Coach Wiebe.
Yeah, Wiebe.
They all do a great job with them. They're just awesome what they've done.
Yeah, no, and they definitely they had to be good because they're in the same league as Hanover. They're in the same league as Clifton Clyde, but most years they don't get to play them because Clifton Clyde's in division. But nonetheless, that's a league where they've got to be good to get at the top. Next guy I wanted to ask you about, and you mentioned him earlier, is Kevin Ayers, who's the only 8-man coach to win state titles at 3 different schools, and obviously only
four different titles, 3 different schools, 2 at Jetmore Longhorns, and then the Sharing Springs or Wallace County Wildcats, and then of course Little River Indians, Redskins. But Kevin Ayers, you got to understand, I'm out in the bank in the insurance business, so I left teaching and coaching when he was in high school. So I've known his parents forever, and I think you know that personally on some emails I sent to you about how much respect I have for him. And he played his college ball down, definitely. But more than that, he's just an incredible technician in the game. He's quiet, humble, grew up that way. His mom, her maiden name is Maston, and C.R. Blue Maston was his grandpa on his mom's side. A lot of people out there, if they're history buffs like Fred McLean would be, you'd like to know that Fred ever watches this podcast, that it would be Kevin Ayers' grandpa owned the original Butterfield stagecoach, the real stagecoach that you might see in old-time movies. And he kept in the Quonset building across from his house. And he also had a bunch of Conestoga wagons. You just call them covered wagons. They were all green on the bottom with white tops, and they would take a summer stroll from Russell Springs, Kansas, clear down to Castle Rock, along the Smoky Hill River bottom, and they'd have horse rides and camping, cooking, have hot cocoa and marshmallows and everything you think of. And but that was he owned all them wagons. Probably had about 6, 8, 10 of them in that Quonset building as well. So I go back there, and I knew he was a customer in the bank when I was out in the bank and insurance business out there. And he was a character. He was a perfectionist. His grandpa was a perfectionist, and so was Kevin. So he comes by that very idea, And I told Kevin that one year when it's going to play South Haven, and is out there. I think Jeff Hennick was his quarterback, who's now at Oakley. And if I think it was correctly, was that 206?
That was 07.
207. Yep. 207. And that Wednesday before then, I looked at all the stats, and I see, okay, South Haven's going to be there. This could be, if things go right, with no on staff by both teams. I said up there in the press box, this could be over at halftime. Could be. It could be a 45% miss rule. And that's no offense to South Haven or or Wallace County, but that's just what I'm thinking. And so I called Kevin on Wednesday beforehand. I said, Kevin, is it okay if I tell the story about your grandpa Blue? Because that was his nickname, CR Blue Master. And he said, now, Larry, this is Kevin talking. Kevin said, Larry, now you know a lot of stories about my grandpa. Which one are you going to tell? And I said, I think I'll tell the one about the rattlesnake that got bit in the rattlesnake that died. Yeah, you can tell that one. So about 2 or 3 minutes to go in the game on that Saturday down in Newton, it was 48-0, and I said, it's going to end up 48-0. It's going to be a Mercer rule just over at halftime. So I told that story that he was out farming, and he got done with that field southwest of Russell Springs, and he was going back on the road, taking his implement back to town, and he saw a green weed out there, and the green weed you can't have that. He stopped his tractor right on the dang road. And he walked out there to reach down. And probably ticked off that green weed was stubborn, hadn't started to die yet or wilt. And he reached down underneath it, and there's a rattlesnake coiled up underneath that stuck him and bit him. So he got bit by a rattlesnake. But he ended up killing that rattlesnake there, but nobody else knows that as far as the story at the time. So he goes back to town, takes his tractor back to town, and his next door neighbor is an old guy we call the Cowboy Repshire. And she tells that story to old Cowboy Repshire. Well, he calls the Coster Funeral Home in Oakley at the time. They send a hearse out there with a gurney in it. They've got to take him up. Well, Blue, he don't go in the hospital and have the venom sucked out of him by a rattlesnake bite. Hell no, he's too tough. He goes and gets Epsom salts in a tub of water. So he's soaking in his tub. All of a sudden, there's a knock on the door, and it's these guys with a gurney. And the wife answers the door and says, what are you guys here for? Well, we heard Blue got bit by a rattlesnake and he died. Well, Blue's in the tub and he heard that. So he wraps a towel around him, gets out there, and he goes, do I look dead? And he probably said a little choice words that might be censored. So I didn't say them on TV for all the good reasons. But anyway, he said, I can show you, go out there, the rattlesnake's one dead. You can go bomb the rattlesnake. I'm going to get back in the tub. And that's what he did. And so that story, and you should have seen my sidekick up in the booth, the broadcast booth at Newton. Old Jeremy McGuire, he gave me the deer in the headlight look with those earphones on, headphones on.
I'm sure his face almost.
Oh, he looked at me like, oh, I can't believe he said, because he did not know I was going to tell that. Only Kevin Ayers and I knew that. That's a true story, too, Julian. Ain't that something?
Yeah, I can't wait to interview him someday and ask him what it's like to work with you. That'd be great.
Oh, McGuire, you mean? Oh, yeah. He'll probably say, well, we should have thrown a quarter with him and threw him away years ago.
Who knows? And one coach that I've never gotten to know. Those three guys I've interacted with on some level, but this one was gone before my. Jerry Slayton of Anston. I've heard just a few stories about the guy. Tell me about this fellow.
Oh, Jerry Slayton's awesome. He went to the same college, Northwestern Oklahoma, Alba Rangers, same place as my coach did, Larry Friend, the last 2 years. I mean, Friend went to Dodge City JUCO, All-American halfback, didn't wear any hip pads his sophomore year. But he went down there because he followed the head coach, Mr. Parkhurst, down there because he got the head job, and took about 9 or 10 kids with him. And Jim Miller was one of the quarterback at the time. He was a principal for years at Southwestern Heights, Plains, Kansas area. He was a quarterback when Larry Friend was a halfback. And they went down there anyway. And so Jerry Slayton, he was an Oklahoma kid, and he went to school there. And I kept asking him about things. He said, if you went in the gymnasium down there at the college, he said, it's got Larry Friend on the 100-yard dash, the broad jump, the relays, got everything. He said, nobody's ever going to touch them records. He said, he's on there, a legend. This is years ago. But getting back to how he was in football, when his Jetmore, remember, Sports Illustrated had the king of 8-man football is Hodgman County. And it had stories in the Sports Illustrated of Hanson Elks and the Jetmore Longhorns. and that 8-man. And I love that when Oliver Salmons was quarterbacking and his brothers and all that. But Jerry Slayton was incredible with what the techniques. Now, you know how he did his defense, Julian?
No, I don't.
Oh, well, you're going to find out. I loved it. You know what does that mean? If he run a 3-2, let's just say run a 3-2 or even a 3-3. But guess what? If he's going to run if he called out 3-12 or 3-14 or 3-04, you know what that meant?
Well,
The first two.
They end with 4s, so I got to guess that it's a 4-man front.
Well, but guess, let's say 3-3-0. They start with 3-0-3 or 3-0 or 3-1-2 or 3-1, or he had that 3-0, 3-1 or 3-2. Those are the first two numbers he called all the time. You know what that meant? The free guy, the middle guy, the nose guard is on straight up from the center. Now, if he said 3-1, then that meant you line up in the 1 hole. And if you said 3-2, you line up on it. And that meant the linebacker behind him is going the opposite direction. So a 3-2, that means he's going to go, I'm going to slant to a 3-2, the nose guard, I'm going this way. And the linebacker, you go to the other side. We got the center covered on both sides, maybe quarterback with a shotgun or whatever. But to me, that was the old thing that I did my drills I told you about earlier, how I did my passing drills when I was a junior high coach. I designed them things. To me, that was keep it simple, stupid. So he would yell that out to the sideline, and right away they knew what to do. Now, to me, that intrigued me as a TV announcer, learning all this stuff, the schemes of what he did and how he called things.
Keeping it simple.
That was the most impressive thing to me from him. But he had. I was there the day they had Jerry Slayton Day. And I've got one of his T-shirts that has it. Hanson Elks, they had honored him for all the years that he was there for 8-man coach and all that. And then they named the football field after him, the stadium, the Jerry Slayton Field and all that. But he was incredible. And the last game I refereed in 2004, February 17th, matter of fact, February 17th, 2004. I was as a year after my dad passed away. Exactly, my dad's funeral was the year before, 2/17 of 2003, at 83 years of age. And I was refereeing the game between Montezuma and South Gray, running Rebels, at Hanson Elks, and he was on the score clock, keeping score. And he gave me a basketball signed by both teams, both players. At the time, wanted me because he knew that was going to be my last game. I was going to referee at high school after 30-some years and over 2,000 games of refereeing. So, but Jerry Slayton was just an incredible person, great coach, great guy, humble as heck. But he would do anything for you. And to me, that's the way most coaches are that way. All of them. Some of your greatest coaches never win any sub-state games or never get in postseason. I don't mean they're not good coaches, for God's sakes. You know that. I know that.
Oh, sure.
But a lot of the public, today, and this book I'm writing, I've got a chapter on fans, the way fans act. And it's called, Hey, Fans, Take a Chill Pill. That's the name of that chapter. Hey, fans, take a chill pill.
Yeah, at the last 8-man coaches clinic, I know Coach McLean, he got up. They asked him to come give a talk, coming out of retirement brief, the offensive coordinator at Madison. And he just started out by saying, we got to start taking better care of our officials. We need to have some talks with parents because of the abuse that officials get during games from some people, getting ridiculous. And I'll always, you mentioned it earlier, fans were getting on this team because they only ran 6 plays or something like that. They were upset that it wasn't more complicated. Yeah. Or I remember Matt Fowler was telling me once, he's a zone defense guy. He pretty much runs just zone, and always fans be yelling, for the defensive backs, get up in his face, right? Play man coverage because they think that because it's 8-man, you got to play man coverage, which really isn't true in a lot of circumstances. I mean, zone works really well. But fans always know exactly what they want. They always know what they think the team should be doing, of course. And I guess that's what makes fans and not coaches they were coaches, they'd actually have to learn this stuff.
Well, the sad thing about it is there's very few athletes, what percent, are your next Michael Jordan in basketball or Jackie Stiles in basketball, or your next Barry Sanders or your Gale Slayers. And I can remember Barry Sanders played in the Shrine Bowl game in 1986, and a lot of people don't know this. I think the stats got corrected. They were wrong on the Kansas Shrine Bowl website, and I let them know what the proper stat should be, because he scored 2 touchdowns. The West won 42-20, and he had 234 yards rushing in the game and didn't play much of it. And it took him to 1999 before Rashad Washington running a single-wing offense before they finally broke Barry Sanders' record. But it was student body left, student body. The rule was back then you had to have a balanced line. Well, as soon as the ball was snapped, Dan Johnson, head coach of Wichita Southeast Golden Buffaloes, and Mark Bliss was the assistant coach, and he was at Conway Springs running single wing offense there with Eric Polly, who played out at Colorado State, and all them guys. But the Rashad Washington, as soon as the ball was snapped, is pulling guards, were going left to right, student body left, student body right, and probably 30 more carries. Rashad Washington finally broke Barry Sanders' record. But and that's when Tony Crow, the current coach at Hayes High, he played in the '99 Shrine Bowl game too. But you take him and you take Mark Bliss, what did he have at Conway Springs? Maybe 81 out of 85 games he won, and had 60 some in a row, and that's a good honor for him. Matt Beeler this year won Class 1A here in Hayes, and I was proud of him because he's a Southwestern College grad, a good friend of mine, and he was assistant coach this summer at the 50th annual Shrine Bowl game when they honored Barry Sanders, being Hall of Fame for the Shrine Bowl, which is deservingly so. But back in 1986, Doug Meckel was the coach at Victoria, and they won state in 2A, and Larry Fram was the coach up at Plainville, and they won state in 3A. So both them guys are assistant coaches. And you like this trivia. Mark Templin, who was at Andover lately, but he was at, I think, Derby at first. But anyway, he was the head coach in 1986. And the humor with them 6 coaches back then in the huddle was that, well, they thought Barry Sanders coming as a lineman, but we thought the kid might have some unique speed, so we changed it to running back. That's just humor by the coaches. And so you know what the results of that, but so that was just funny. And I've tried to get the Shrine Bowl game, and I said, you got some of the archives of that particular game? I said, I'd love to have a copy of that game. And I haven't got it yet, but I'll get it.
So I've collected a lot of film over the years.
Yeah.
Thousands of high school games from Kansas. Most of them 8-man, but some 11-man too. Back in 2012 to 2015 was when I was kind of collecting 11-man film also. And It is so disappointing to me how much great film just doesn't exist anymore, or schools don't know where it is. So, for instance, this is the worst one I can think of. I got in contact with Hutchinson High School. This is in 2014 or so. This is after Dreiling left, right? And I basically asked.
Yeah, you probably had Ryan Cornelson then, didn't you?
Yeah, he would have been the head coach, but I didn't get in touch with him. I got in touch with one of the assistants, maybe the athletic director or somebody.
Yeah.
But he did looking around for DVDs, and I told him, I'll pay for them or I'll send blank DVDs or whatever. And he was able to scrounge up, I think, 5 or 6 DVDs from their glory years. And it's just this program went to won 6 consecutive titles and 7 out of 9. I mean, 7 out of 9. It was just, it was 7 of 8. But how on earth is this all not backed up, archived, organized? Why is this not in a temple somewhere? Why is this not better taken care of? It's just insane to me. This is a big.
You wanted out back. That's right, and we couldn't find much back when I played. There was a couple games, but that's probably 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter, whatever it was back in those days.
Right.
And there was 2 games we found them when I got Coach Friend in the Hall of Fame. So I did that, and I had Bob Davis doing this 1980 game. He was broadcasting KOS at the time, college, Fort Hays State, TMP, area high school game. But Bob Davis and Tad Phelps did it for the KCAN radio up in Phillipsburg, who was a great, great guy and a great ambassador up there from the schools in Norton, Smith Center, Phillipsburg, all that, and Plainville. But when I knew Bob Davis did the 1980 game with my high school coach in Cimarron up at Plainville, I said, I got to have that tape. So I spent 95 to 100 hours editing, which you do. I spent 95 to 100 hours editing that 798 pictures and 3 hours of video down to one DVD, 52 minutes long, when I had Coach Friend's Hall of Fame banquet in March 20th of 2004. And that takes, I appreciate what you have to do, anybody, but you're talking about the archives, how they did that. It's incredible what it takes to edit it and do what you need to do to get your finished product, which, again, 99% of the people, that's a flyby. I mean, the blue light special at Walmart is over. They missed the sale and missed the day to most people. But getting back to what you're saying about, there's not that many players out there that's a Barry Sanders or a Gale Sayers. But the fans are idiots most of the time. I think every fan, and I put this in my book that I'm writing, chapter, that every fan ought to have to officiate, get licensed to officiate for at least 1 year, maybe 2, before they're even allowed to watch their own kids play, let alone be a fan for other kids. I'll guarantee you, you'd straighten up. Fred McLean might be spot on. Him and I talked about this. And if they did that, everybody had to be a fan. They'd put a lump in their throat. They might think twice before they make some of the comments that they make.
And I think the thing that frustrates me the most, yelling at the officials is not going to change their minds. It's not going to make them give you a favorable call after that. I think it'd be clear that if anything, you're probably just making them grumpier with you, which is not a good idea, but it accomplishes no good, and it sets a terrible example. Something that you touched on, you mentioned the single wing at the Shrine Bowl. And
yeah,
I think it's fair to say that people know you for your almost boyish enthusiasm about football. You know, you're always very into it. You're always excited, you know, when you hear you on the airwaves. But it seems to me that, you know, old-fashioned football, old school football, you might call it, you know, whenever that's on display, it's a little extra for you. Is this true?
Yeah, because it brings back all your memories. That's the way you played the game. It's like the Dick Butkus there. It's like Gale Sayers talked about. You know, when he talked about getting this back to Kansas, Nebraska, June of 2011, when he was a speaker here in Hayes at the Nebraska All-Star Games, June of 2011. His topic was called Open Field. Open Field was his topic. And he talked about 5 fabulous people, incredible leaders and representatives, from the doctor that put his knee back together, Dr. Theodore Fox, to George Hallis, to Dick Butkus, you know, and then the Buddy Young. Buddy Young, nobody knows who Buddy Young is. He was a 5'4" guy back when the AFC was trying to,
A great running
yeah,
back.
he was in the Rose Bowl. He was everything for, I think it's Indiana or Illinois, I think, when they was in the way back when. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the tape, find out which university, but they played in the Rose Bowl, and he's the MVP of the game.
I think it was Illinois.
He was only 5'4", according to Gale Sayers, and he ended up dying in the 1980s of a car wreck. But he said he was the one that talked him into becoming the Chicago Bears with Rozelle instead of going to the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC.
Right. So for reference, for those who weren't around back in the 60s, Gale Sayers was drafted. The AFL and the NFL were rivals, and obviously Gale got drafted by both leagues, and he had to pick which one to go to. Same thing.
That's right. You're correct.
Simpson and all sorts of stars back then.
Yeah, and of course that's what he talked about. Well, Brian Piccolo got drafted the same year, 64, but they didn't. He was a 1,000-yard rusher at Wake Forest, and he didn't have a rookie card. So I personally have a rookie card 4 years later, 68 or 69, and as an heir, it's got his name spelled wrong on the front of the card, and again another spelled on the back side of the card. So it's B-R-I-A-N, and on the front side, I'd have to correct it. One of them is B-R-Y-O-N, and the other one is B-R-Y-A-N. Front and back of the card is different, says those names. but it's really Brian. We know it's Brian Song and Brian Piccolo. And part of the speech that Gale Sayers have for any listening audience, or that is that he said everybody was griping about George Halas, that he's one of the most caring individuals you have. He said, here's Brian Piccolo, the most enthusiastic guy. He's dying of cancer, and he's cheering me on to get well from my knee and everything else and all that kind of stuff. And he said, George Halas paid for his 3 daughters' college education all the way and paid for all the medical bills when Brian Piccolo was in the hospital. Now, darn few people know that, but that was mentioned by Gale Sayers in June of 2011 in Hays, Kansas, VFW Hall, where we had that banquet.
Right. I mean, George Halas was very famously cheap when it came to player contracts, but if a player was ever in trouble, I guess, as long as he had a good relationship with him, he would take care of him. Al Davis would do that.
You're right.
Yeah.
And Gale said that the other people, just exactly what you said, but Gale said, when the year was over with, if I'd done well, he'd give me a bonus. He said, so he treated me very well.
Better be.
He said,
Gale
so contrary to what a lot of public.
He's a pretty special player.
Well, and it was, yeah, it was. And he was representing KU as an ambassador back in March of 2011, and he came here for a meet and greet in Hays. And I met him then, and I congratulated him on being the Kansas Comp in the 60s. And he relished that moment and grinned from ear to ear. And I said, but you wasn't the first one. He said, I'm not. No. And that's when I brought up, I didn't tell him his name, but I said, 5 foot, 755 pounds, Burdette, Kansas, called the Kansas Com in the 50s, which meant Larry Friend, but I didn't tell him his name. And so anyway, he said, what did that old boy do the 100-yard dash? And I said, 9.4, at least 3 times in life. And Gale Sayers personally told me, he said, I did 9.7 myself. But he said, my brother Ronnie Sayers ran a 9.3 and beat Bobby Hayes in a duel.
Wow.
Who we know, Bobby Hayes is a 1960 Olympian champion. So right quick, like I said, we're going to call you Broading Ronnie, the Nebraska commandant. And old Gale lights up from ear to ear, grinning from ear to ear again. And that's also true. That's a true comment he said to me. And so that's just great to be associated with some of the things that, because of what he said in March of 2011, is how he got him to be a speaker for the 8-man banquet, just paying attention to what was said. And I had just, all it did, the worst thing he could tell me is, no, I'm not interested. No, I'm not going to do this. But I said, Gale, that's Nebraska, Kansas. You grew up until you was 8 years of age. You lived in Speed, Kansas, up by Logan and Glade. And then you moved to Omaha so you could play grade school football. So they didn't have nothing in Kansas, no popcorn or football, nothing back then. But your dad's brother was up in Omaha and said, come on up here. We got it up here. And that's how they moved from here to Nebraska, the whole family. A lot of people don't know that either.
Yeah. Thinking back over some of the players you've seen play and that you've commentated on, are there some that stand out to you? Just remember watching them and thinking, man, this guy was so much fun to watch, or this guy was such an overachiever, or whatever it might be. Various state games or all-star games.
Well, there's several, and I hate to remiss to forget some of them, but
you are absolutely going to forget some of them because you've seen so many. I mean, you can't name them all.
Yeah,
but just a few that come to mind.
No, but one of it has to be Maverick LaRock from Osborne. He was awesome back in the day. I can't remember the year now.
13. But
he played for Tiernan. And I mean, he had like 5 touchdowns that day, and he was running through people, over people, around people, under people. He was just a bulldozer on wheels that day. That's one of them in particular back in those days.
Awesome defensive.
Of course, you remember, and what's that?
Awesome defensive lineman too.
Yes, he was. He was just a mean, tough football player, and he wouldn't be denied anything he was doing, whether it's running or tackling. He wouldn't be denied. There's no quitting that dog. And another one, I just loved the way you could throw the ball at his ankles, and that's that Beaverly from back then. I think they're still called Claflin Wildcats.
They were Central Plains.
No, Central Plains Oilers probably.
Those black.
I always want to call them Claflin Wildcats, but anyway, but you could throw that ball any place. And then you got Menges, that was the quarterback playing for Fort Hays late now. He was awesome too. And then you take Spearville. Now I can't remember there's a Steckline kid, wasn't it?
What?
Or Stein. What was the mother
Stein.
grew up the mother grew up in Hayes, and she was a piper, and she married, and her son was a stud running back for Spearville when they went 13-0.
Nathan Stein here.
Yeah.
And number 8.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was awesome also. But there's so many of them. You take back in the day, I can't remember now. That's too long back for Baileyville B&B. They were great, but all the Hoyers teams up there, you could multiply about 4 or 5 Bruners probably.
Sure.
But and then the assistant coach, he was always the basketball coach, and his son was a hell of a receiver. Remember that year?
Losey.
You probably got the names of.
Yeah, Trey.
Well,
Losey,
I'd have to go back. What's that?
I think Trey Losey is the one you're talking about.
Yep. That's it. And they always come out here 1A when they had state basketball and football or basketball out here. His teams always be here year in, year out, boys and girls. And he was always a great coach. But his son was a heck of a receiver for Matt Hoyer on the football team too. But that's back, I think, when they had those 5 receivers from 500 to 1,500 yards.
Yeah, that was the year. I'll bring a few names into it. Cole Shanky of Madison. Got to see him twice.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, he was mean. He was tough. And then there was was it Brandon Shanky?
He had an older brother
named
Cale. There's Cole Shanky. He's the youngest. He has an older brother, Cale, and then they have an older brother named Caleb. Cale Shanky was on that 2010 team.
Yeah, they probably played the 2011 All-Star game. One of them did.
Yeah, Dylan Barnard was in that 2011 one also.
Barnard was in that. Yeah, I remember his name.
Great player.
That's when Fred was out here. One of the assistant coaches was C.T. Young out of Freddie Prairie. And Kieran was in the audience when I looked at that tape. And it was just, now there's another one that you don't see much out here, but he was just a great person at the All-Star games up in Beloit. And also even at, they haven't hardly got down to Newton, but I'd see him down there, the Chris Haag, Haag, at West Elk, Howard. Great guy. And then, but get this, the guy that Sedan, you don't see much of Sun Devils. You don't see much of them up here. Huh? Yeah, both. Nick's great. Nick's a great person, great guy, and he followed legend. Now, legend about him is Les Davis. Did you know much about Les?
I don't know a lot about him, just what I've heard from Mick. But I know he had around 300 wins or something.
379.
Hmm.
Guess what? He was at the time in USA Paper. He had the most wins of any active coach at that time in the state of Kansas. And I happened to get a USA Paper that day, and I read it. And Les was, when I first became a coach at Circle High, he was the football coach and baseball coach at Circle and track coach. But then he switched to that. He was baseball and football mainly. He's a Friends graduate, Friends University. And I'm assistant to Les. And he was there 2 years. Yeah, 2 years. And he didn't play a school members kid from Benton. I won't mention the names, but the school board member voted him out. He wasn't at a meeting one night. So they voted him out and they fired him. So he goes down to Sedan and he becomes all everything. Basketball coach, football coach, baseball coach, did everything down to Sedan. And he's a hero. So get this, good true story. In the early 90s, Sedan made the state class 3A basketball in Hutchinson. I'm one of the state referees for that game. And I'm refereeing it. Now, I know who the teams I'm refereeing. I think it was playing Wichita Collegiate at that time when they had that Evans kid that went to play for Nebraska and ended up at Emporia State. Remember him? The little
D'Angelo Evans, you mean?
Yeah, D'Angelo Evans. And when he had a jump shot, the bottom of his feet might be at your waist. I mean, incredible leap on that kid. He's either going in or not because you ain't going to block his shot. But anyway, so before the game goes in there, how the referees always get the head coaches and find out then pronounce, who's the captain, all this kind of stuff. I said, congratulations, Les Davis, Coach Davis, congratulations making the state. I said, just beat the heck out of Circle High School. He looked at me with a deer in headlight look, and I'm like, should I know you? Well, I changed, he changed, but I knew who I was going to referee, so I had the upper hand over him. And he said, and the true story, he's now passed away. But so I told Les, I said, well, congratulations getting here. And he said, Jantz, you ain't going to believe this. He said the current superintendent, 20 years later, whenever it was, or 30 years later, from the 70s out to the 90s, at least 20 years later, whoever the current superintendent was at that time at Circle had tried to get permission from the superintendent down there, and that was Jim, Jim, shouldn't remember his name. He's retired and lives in Joplin now, but he tried to get permission from the superintendent to talk to Sedan's Piffle to see if they can't recruit Les Davis to go back up to Circle. He told me that. And I said, I think I know the answer to that. He said, yeah, I'm not going to return the call. No.
Seems like that.
But that's how what goes around comes around. But that's also true. So when I saw it in the paper, maybe this is 7-8 years ago. He was still before Mick took over Bolt. Before he took over, he was retired and he lived down at wanted to retire. He had his letter of resignation on the athletic director's desk for 2 or 3, 4 years. They would never honor it. So he was still the football coach. Les told me that personally before he passed away. And I called him up one time when I saw it in the paper that they had 379, the most active winning coach in Kansas at the time. So I called him up and I says, is this Coach Davis? Yeah. And I fibbed on him. I was like, I said, you need to play my son at quarterback. I'm ticked off at you. I called him like an irate fan like this. And he called some name like, are you Mike or whatever? No, I'm not. And I said, but I got your attention, didn't I? Yeah, you got my attention. Who is this? And then I told him, I said, well, I was your first assistant coach at Circle years ago. And he said, are you Larry Jantz? And I said, yes, I am. And so we had some few moments of just laughter and all that what go through that, how a good coach could get fired because he didn't play a school member of his kid.
Yeah, that'll happen sometimes. Politics has gotten many good coaches out of the profession or out of a certain job. You've mentioned it a few times now, and I think this is probably a good topic to wrap things up with. But you're writing a book. Why did you decide to write a book? When can we expect it? Yeah.
Good question. I've had many people ask me that. I have currently, Julian, I have probably 120 pages typed up, 8.5, 11. So book size, it might be 135, 140. There's different topics about just a kid growing up on the farm, the work ethic, being blessed to come up with, be raised by God-loving parents. That work ethic was incredible. Dad was a World War II veteran, so that's pretty strict. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, so he demanded everything out of me, you might say, from me and my brother and my 2 sisters. There's little things about that school. There's one chapter in the book that's on the David versus Goliath moment when we was the smallest school, the tournament champions, the 20th annual tournament champions in Dodge City, and we won the game over the largest school in Kansas at that time, Shawnee Mission East Lancers. We won it 51-48. I was captain that night, proud of that moment. But the next day, the paper said the David beats Goliath. So that's one chapter in the book. There's another chapter in the book about funny interaction by players, coaches, and fans. That comes through my 30-some years to over 2,000 games of refereeing high school basketball, of things that the kids say on the floor that parents and coaches have no clue what was being said or done. Funny stuff. It's funny and laugh. I've sent copies of some of those chapters to some people. They just laughed their butt off so far. But and then there's one about the monument of the Mount Everest of golf, and I'm extremely proud of that. My grandson was on the Hayes High golf team in 2016, win state championship over Rose Hill and Wichita Collegiate down at the Ulysses golf course. And that was, his name's Peyton Reuter. Today he's in Christchurch, New Zealand as a mechanical engineer for a Hilti impact wrenches. But that particular day, May 23rd, 2016, was his 18th birthday. And what makes it special is I said, I could give you a Ben Franklin and go blow it. But what's I asked, what did you do on 18th birthday? And he's helped the golf team win state. So that chapter is called the Mount Everest of golf, because it takes, well, starting 3.5, and he's 18. That's a long journey up a mountain called Mount Everest. But there's other things in there about Steve Tasker. There's going to be stuff in there about Gail Sayers. There's stuff in there about all the years of Mike's coaching at Circle. Got stuff in there about the junior high stuff when I was 2 years of that and never lost a game. Not bragging on it, just that. But the things about there's pitting coaches and referees and just and people that I went to school with. They said, "My God, Jantz, before you have a brain fart or brain cramp, you need to write a book." And so after 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 years of people telling me that, maybe, I don't know, at least 6, 7 years, they've told me that. I finally said, well, I need to pull the string and start writing one. So that's where I'm at. And, but to me, it's a kaleidoscope. It's a kaleidoscope of sporting events, sporting stuff about, how I was raised, how I was taught by Larry Friend. There's a coach, my chapter on Coach Friend, who I admired immensely. And everybody would be blessed to have coaches like I had in high school. We put them as dedicated our school annual to. Berlin Anderson, come from McPherson, played for Ralph Miller at Wichita State, big left-handed, 6'4" guy from McPherson, played Wichita State under Ralph Miller. He came out to Cimarron for 2 years. He was assistant in football, Larry Friend. Friend was assistant to him in basketball. They were incredible, great coaches, great people. And because of that, I probably went to teaching and coaching and probably been involved in sports ever since that, because of the impact that these coaches had on your life from the get-go. And so the chapter on Coach Friend, unfortunately, in 2004, when we put him in the Hall of Fame, my basketball coach, Berlin Anderson, died about 10 years before that. And so there was an incredible letter written and spoke at that banquet by his widow, and she was from McPherson also. But the chapter on Friend is entitled "The Stick of Dynamite," our spark plug. So, because he was, and I've already told you his attributes as an athlete. There's no coach alive that I know of, or even athlete that's that fast as him. And he knew the X's and O's. Not so much, maybe everybody knows X's and O's, what a book's going to do, your offense, defense. But he had that intangible fact of being an incredible motivator. And I'll share one thing with you. When we played meet, when I was a senior or junior, I think, but the rule was, if you get on a school bus and we're going 35 miles from wherever we're going to go play, you better keep your mouth quiet and think about your responsibility. That was on the bus. Well, when you leave Cimarron, Arkansas River city limits is 35 miles to Fowler, 35 miles to meet. So you better keep quiet. Well, these kids were still, some of the players on the team, they were still chit-chatting. We're 4 or 5 miles, we're 10 miles, we're 15 miles away from Cimarron. I look at the rearview mirror, I see the bus driver, and he knows there's a lot of chat going. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, something's going to hit the fan here pretty soon. So we get down there. It's like Meade wasn't that good back then. I think we beat them 46-6. But the point is, regardless of what the score was, and I think I know this, we've only played half the game. And he put the lineman back in the backfield and the backfield up in front for a while during this game. But prior to that, in the dressing room, lights out. The only thing you saw was exit lights in the Meade gymnasium. We're dressed. You're 15, 20 yards from any other teammate. Dark. Can't see nothing. And Friend, you hear Friend's voice. He was like a Vince Lombardi. I'll tell you what, he was ticked off, mad and heck, because we did not have our head in the game and the bus ride getting down to Meade. And so he let us know about it. But when he got done and they turned the lights on and opened up that door, Katie barred the door, we thought we could go beat the Green Bay Packers. And God bless you, I know that. The team had a whole change of attitude, and we totally dominated the game. That's the power of a motivated coach. And there are some people that you could be had a case of diarrhea sitting on the toilet. They couldn't motivate to get the job done. He was just the opposite. And I was blessed. Jillian, to have coaches like that. And every other kid that has coaches that inspire them to be great citizens and grow and become great citizens and parents and later on in life, that's what it's all about. It's not so much the wins and losses, but you learn from these here experiences, and I've learned incredible about. So some of those things there is probably what people spurred me. Jantz, you need to write a book. So I am, but there ain't gonna be no fake news in mine. It's all gonna be true stuff. No woke news, no fake news. Be right from the heart, everything I say. And they're all personal experiences mainly, or what other people shared with me. And I've been blessed to referee for a lot of people. I even read through, I'm proud of this dude too. I probably 40 to 50 kids from Fort Hays State got to referee their very first varsity game with me in basketball. Because back in those days, when Bud Meckel was the intramural guy, and now Ron Hay, you had to be 3 years experience before the guys would hire you as a referee these leagues. Ain't that way today, but that's what it was back then. So they'd call me up, Bud Meckel would, Ron Hay. Hey, Jantz, you got a slot open? I got somebody they're tired of doing JV, junior high, and all that. They want to cut the teeth doing some varsity. And so I would say, yeah, what's her name? And they'd tell me Neil Baker, Ron Baker's dad out at Scott City, or they tell me Patrick Poore from Stockton, who just retired last December, being a college coach all his life. Or it'd be Jamie McClure, still refereeing. Or how about Dusty Trail, that coached 20 years now down at Bishop Carroll. He's from Osborne, Dusty Trail. All these guys refereed these are just some of them, but between 40 and 50 of them refereed the first game with me. And I'm proud of that too. So I'm proud of them because I said, I've got to hand the baton over. I'm got to mentor them. I'm not going to be refereeing forever. Nobody does. And I was going to quit before there's people I see referee that probably should have hung it up a few years ago. I said, I don't want to get to that point. So I quit in 2004 after 30-some years, over 2,000 games. So lots of those experiences are going to be in the book, truthfully, as how I remember them. And I worked with Don Dawes, and he was incredible. He had about 60 years. Sonny Weinhardt, my God, Norb Flax, all sorts of Max Porter, Don Weens, Gail Sear, Terry Grindle, lots of them Fort Hays State, young kids. Manuel Torres, he came from Montezuma. We did a lot of ball games with him. Bo Tatro, just different guys like that over the years. That's just some of them. But there's too many to mention here. But I'm just proud of everything that maybe I've helped somebody along the way. And I hope the book's going to be a funny read when I get done with it. I guarantee it. I'm not going to talk about stats like how the game is invented. And I respect a lot of people that write those books and give you 30 years of history about this, that, and something else. But I hope mine's going to be a fun read. But to me, it's a kaleidoscope. It's a kaleidoscope of events, sports, and there's going to be. And I started being a KU fan in basketball at between 6 and 7 years of age, when they won the national championship on March 20th of 1952. We're out in a car, my brother and I. My dad's excited. Now, if it was Oklahoma or Nebraska or K-State or Colorado or somebody, I'd been excited. But it hadn't been KU playing St. John's. When you're that age, 6 or 7, that's at an age where you could be very motivated by your parents or your people you look up to. And so Dad was excited, and they won. And Clyde Belt had 33 points, wore an illegal jersey today, legal back then, 16, had 33 points, MVP of the game, and they won 80-63 over St. John's University. Well, my dad's excited, terribly excited. And so guess what? I've been a Rock Chalk KU fan ever since. And there's going to be things in there about that. Lots of things about Bill Self up currently. I even saw his son Tyler last week when I went to UConn game of basketball. And Tyler says, make sure you get hold of my dad. He'll write something in a book for you. And I've made lots of things that he has on his wall in his office, handmade, that you can't buy at any fancy rally house or any place else. That he's wrote me thank you notes, and I've cried tears over some of the thank you notes I've got from Bill Self. He's down to earth. He's a special individual. But those are some of the things that are going to be in the book, Julian. My brother asked me how many books you're going to sell. And I said, I don't know. Don't probably be enough for a two-old crapper. What do you mean two-old crapper? And I said, well, if you're sitting on one, you're reading it, and the next hole's open, and you don't like what you read, throw it down the hole. And move on. And my brother Rich started laughing like crazy. He said, no, he said, it'll be a fun read. And I'm going to mention things in there about his college roommate in college was Bruce DeHaven, come from Belfry Truesdale. And how he got started by being the Steve Tasher special teams coach at Buffalo Bills. Because Bruce was first 2 years out of college was a coach at Oxford High School. And then he was a Wichita Southeast Golden Buffalo assistant coach. Then he moves up to KU as assistant coach at KU football. And at that time, Marv Levy was the head coach of the Chiefs, gets fired, but gets hired up at Buffalo. And he liked what Bruce DeHaven did over at KU and hired him to be a special team coach. At that same time, Steve Tasher gets released from waivers from the Houston Oilers. That's December of 1986. And he needed a gunner. And he knew Steve had won the 100 and the 200 meters back in the 80s at Leody High School. So he picked him up for $100,000 for a song and a dance. And the rest of that's it. Because if you get an NFL book today, it says the best special teamer in 75 years is Steve Tasker, 5'9", 180-pounder from Leody, Kansas. He's born in Smith Center, April 10th. When his dad was a minister at Kinston, he was born in Smith Center. Then the family moved to Glasgow. Then he went down to Kiowa, and he finally graduated out of Leody. So that's how I got him to be a speaker in 1993 for the West Team Shrine Bowl banquet. And I had standing room only and 3 week notice, over 600 people in the banquet. And yet that's the title of that chapter, Julian, is you got to be careful what you pray for. Because I had refereed at Quinter on Tuesday, Waukene on Thursday, and Hill City on Friday. And I always said, all the years I refereed, all those 2,000 games, I always said a prayer to my maker during the national anthem. And at the tail end of that prayer, not only is the referee be at the right place, right time to make the right call and no call and sportsmanship be expressed to keep all the players from injury, but the tail end of it, I said, please, as my Tasmanian Tasker, be at the right place, the right time. This Pro Bowl next Sunday, after they got beat by the Cowboys 52-17, and have him be MVP in the Pro Bowl. Amen. Well, I watched the game Sunday. He blocks a kick, recovered a fumble that Neil Smith and Derek Thomas had created for the Chiefs at the time. He ran back after 20 yards and recovered the fumble. And I'll be darned, first time ever in Pro Bowl, a special teamer's named MVP on February 7th, 1993. So I called the next day. This chapter's in the book. The things I've written now is things I've already read and put in there in print. Is that I called the Methodist Church here to get the number. His dad was a minister down at Kingman, Kansas. And I called old Gordon Tasker and his wife, Joanne, Steve's mom. There's 4 kids in the family, David and Paul and Steve and them. And I called them and I said, this is Larry Jantz and Hayes. That's not important. But I got something about Steve. And he said, hold on. Joanne, get on the extension. Larry Jantz and Hayes are talking about Steve. So I told him. And I said that prayer on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday during that week. And I'll be darned, he was MVP of that Pro Bowl on Sunday, the week after. And Joanne told me, said, Larry, he's got boxes and boxes of requests to be graduation speakers, 8th grade, high school, athletic banquets, you name it. But that Luke, his 4-year-old son, then was going to be a kindergarten next year, and he's saying no to everything. But his mom told me over the phone, I hope he says yes to this one. So I said, what's Steve and Sarah doing today? Well, they're just chilling out in Hawaii Monday and Tuesday. and then they're going to go back to Buffalo, New York, hook up a U-Haul, and they're going to come to Kansas. And then Sarah and the kids are going out to Leote for the next 2 weeks, and Gordon, the minister, and Steve are going to go witness the military people off the coast of Carolina and Georgia. He said, so Gordon told me, he said, I'll have Steve call you before we take off. That's before I didn't have my cell phone. Maybe somebody else did. So I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to miss the call from Steve Tasker at all. He called me and he says, well, Miss Sarah and I will talk about it. And I'll let you know. In the meantime, I'll get you hold of Scott Birchall, who's a PR guy at the Buffalo Bills, and a guy named John Murphy. And he run the TV deals. Because Jim Kelly had a 30-minute TV show in Buffalo, New York, and so did Steve Tasker. And he said, I'll have them send you out some video. And I'll send a black and white picture of me in a Buffalo Bills number 89 jersey and one in a Pro Bowl colored one. So while they're out there and doing the Fellowship of Craftsmen Athletes or whatever firm it was, representing client, that's when I get everything in the mail. He gets back and they picked the date. It was March 20th, 1993. And so that's when he came to be a speaker at the banquet, and I had it called West Shrine Bowl Banquet, and money raised from it. And we gave him a football helmet, just like you see at the Shrine parades. I had one made. A guy in Russell and I owned the mold on that. Had one made. Him was specialized with him. The plaque had this Tashmobile. I called it the Tashmobile. Took off the Easy Go and made this here plaque. Cost about $50 to put on it. Put all the wording on there, and that's how it all happened. And he said, wait until the boys see this. That's what Steve said. Wait until the boys see this back home. He went out to the Odeon, played 100 holes of golf. He went down to Dodge City JUCO, played golf. He took that there golf cart and had a firm in town make a trailer for what I told his brothers, just bring a pickup and a 2-inch ball hits, and everything else will be taken care of. Don't tell Steve about it. We're going to surprise him. And there'll be pictures when I do pictures. I'm talking about 120 pages written already with no pictures at all. But when I put that in there, that could be a book on itself. Things I've made and created. But anyway, Julian, I'm sorry about that. But
that's fine.
Got on tangent. No, but that's all true stuff, buddy. It's just experience. So that's why all these things matter together and others. That's why people said, before you have a brain cramp or brain fart, Jantz, you need to write a book. I said, probably wouldn't sell. We flushed it down the crapper. They said, no. There's stories that you know that is going to reflect, and people want the real life stuff that happens. And I said, well, it's real life. There's some benefit fake in mine. And there's just so many things that there was times when Coach Friend and I was refereeing a game, first game between Hayes High and TMP, when Al Bellinger was head coach. He wore a toupee. Second half of the game, Rose Coliseum, first time they'd ever played it. They used to play at Felton Middle School. First time they'd ever played there. And second half of the game, I was the trail ref, and I called a foul on TMP, and I signaled to the bench, fade, towel foul here. And about 2 or 3 rows behind the bench comes a big, thick, white terry cloth towel, hits old Bellinger on the back of the head, and he knocks his toupee forward to covers up his glasses and his face. Boy, he's embarrassed. He's ticked off. He stands up, rips off his damn sport jacket, throws it on Father Earl Beffert's lap, and he turns around and tries to find who in the hell's the guy that did this, and everybody had the stoic look. No, nobody's guilty. And so that's funny. As a referee, you can't laugh, though, but that is funny. And my coach Friend, he wore a toupee also. He had his hair. He didn't have much hair on his head. When he coached me, I always had the deal on. But so we exchanged time. I give him the ball, and I said, Coach, I hope you got double back tape on yours because yours might be next. And Coach Friend, he gets excited, he stutters. So he stuttered a little bit. He said, I hope not. We finished that. So, well, that was in there. That story's in there because it's funny. And there's one other time that Monty Appleby over at Russell, him and Terry Grin was calling the game in the pit, TMP pit. And he don't remember who the heck was playing. But he called a foul on TMP kid. And all of a sudden, Bellinger he takes the jacket, throws it out there about mid-court, about jump circle. And old Monty, in his wisdom, he says, if you can retrieve your jacket without putting your footprints on the floor. I won't call a technical foul on you. And guess what he does? He gets two B teamers down to the bench, come pick him up, carry him out there. Ben leans over, picks up the jacket, goes back and set him down on the bench. And they got a standing ovation. Monty says, "We got a standing ovation, Jantz, by both teams." He said, "I don't remember who they played." I said, "That's funny." I said, "Monty, that'll make my book. That one's funny enough to make my book." But that's just two of maybe 20 that I've got in there so far.
Yeah, don't tell me all of them. I want to say
no, I don't.
I want to say in closing that I think out of the people I've interviewed or talked to on here, they'll appreciate their sports life, but I think you perhaps most of all, more than any of them, appreciate it as a blessing every single day, doing that it keeps others, and that I think that probably is where you get so much enthusiasm and joy from it. People can tell listening to you. Thanks for coming and talking to me.
Let me say this one closing. When I taught and coached, I went to Fellowship Christian Athletes, and this might get emotional, but there's a scripture in the Bible, King James Version, 2 Timothy 2:5, that I use all the years teaching, coaching, and since then. That's from 2 Timothy 2:5, King James Version. Here's exactly what it says. An athlete is not crowned unless you compete according to the rules. To me, that was awesome when I'm fellowship at Estes Park, Colorado, and it's still awesome today. And I said, if you don't like the word athlete, please change it to whatever profession you want it to be. Well, it's a banker, insurance guy, a garbage collector, a coach, teacher. I don't care. If you don't like the word athlete, change whatever, because I guarantee you, if you don't compete to the rules, whatever game you're playing, you're not going to be crowned, buddy. Sorry. And everybody says, have a nice day, have a nice day, have a nice day. Tell all your readers and listeners, no, you don't have anything. They don't have a nice day. You got to take responsibility and make it a great day. You got to make it a great day each and every day. And when you get dressed up in the morning, you get to choose what kind of attitude you want to wear that day. And that's awesome. One of the greatest words in the dictionary is the word attitude. And you get to choose which one you're going to have that day and the rest of your life. And remember, I tell them on a letter sometimes, remember King James Version, 2 Timothy 2:5. And let them go look it up.